Adventures in Supply Chain Podcast is pleased to present episode 29 and first of the Data and Tech in Supply Chain video series with your host, Marcia Williams, Managing Partner at USM Supply Chain. USM Supply Chain helps companies to achieve greater profits with the power of data, process optimization, and transformations in an end-to-end supply chain, ERP, S&OP, source to pay. Marcia and her team have helped companies including Alcoa, Cummins Inc, Lindt Chocolates, Coty, About Face with artist Halsey, US Nonwovens, SCD Probiotics, and Nubenco, among others. In this episode, Marcia talks about the following. Why data in supply chain? Or in other words, what's the importance of data in supply chain? What is Six Sigma? In particular, the DMAIC approach for process optimization. What are the fundamental KPIs or key metrics to track? What is the role of technology? This episode is sponsored by USM Supply Chain. USM stands for Unstoppable, Scalable, Mindful Supply Chain. Check us out at usmsupplychain.com to scale up your profits together with your supply chain. We are preparing an amazing bootcamp for you. The Data-Powered Supply Chain Bootcamp is coming up in March. And now with you, your host, Marcia.
Welcome to this new video series in Adventures in Supply Chain podcast. We are pleased to present Data and Tech in Supply Chain. Let me start by reading some quotes about data. In God we trust. All others bring data. Deming, professor, author, lecturer, and consultant. The goal is to turn data into information and information into insight. Carly Fiorina, former executive, president, and chair of Hewlett-Packard. If we have data, let's look at the data. If all we have are opinions, let's go with mine. Jim Barksdale, former Netscape CEO. You can see that these quotes show the relevance of data. And you, as a leader, are probably thinking how you can leverage this data power and get a greater profitability through cost reduction and revenue increase. Supply chain and data are such a powerful combination. Think about supply chain with a holistic approach that comprises purchasing, operations, and logistics. And within logistics, you have transportation and warehousing. This means different activities. And per the SCORE model, you have plan, source or buy, make, deliver, and return. If you focus and leverage this data power, in particular in 6 links within your supply chain, you will experience greater profitability. So you're probably asking, tell me what the links are. Link number 1, improve customer service. Link number 2, decrease inventory. Who doesn't talk about inventory when we are in supply chain? Inventory is everywhere. Number 3, optimize production processes. Number 4, be agile. Be fast to respond to changes. So critical in these times to be able to pivot. Number 5, cost reduction. Number 6, manage materials. If you want to see this result in the P&L, you need to think what your objectives are and define what data you need. Data is everywhere today, so that could be an issue, such an abundance of data. So you need to gain clarity about your objective and what data to use and search for that. Once you are clear on that point, you need to identify the right data sources. In one company that I was helping, they had an old query that was pulling information from an updated source, and they were struggling with defining the right ETAs and then with on-time deliveries. So it is critical to identify those key data sources and validate data. Data can give you an edge. What is the roadmap to follow? You have probably heard about Lean Six Sigma, and within Lean Six Sigma, about the DMAIC approach. The DMAIC approach has 5 different phases: define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. Let's start with the first phase, that is define. Here, you need to define your problem in statistical terms. Let's say that your problem is late deliveries. It's not enough to say, I want to reduce my late deliveries. Because if in 1 month you have just one more on-time delivery, that would accomplish your goal. But is that your true goal? Of course not. The meaning would be different if you state the problem something along these lines. Reduce late deliveries from 20% to 10% while keeping the same shipping cost. Now you have a challenge. You have a clear scope, a point 8 where you start. In this example, 20% late deliveries. You have point B, where you are heading, where you are going. That is 10%. And you also have a constraint. The shipping cost should be the same. So it's not allowed to use expedited shipping because it will increase your cost. This is the define phase. Now let's move on to the next phase, measure. Measure. This is the second phase in the DMAIC approach. You need to have a measurement system. Such a measurement system needs to have reproducibility and replicability. Reproducibility means that no matter who measures it, everyone will get the same result. If you measure, you get 10%. If I measure, I get 10%. If someone else measures it, we'll get 10%. That is reproducibility. Now, replicability. That means that if you are going to measure late deliveries of past months, so historic late deliveries, you will get the same results that you got in those months. Let's see this with an example. Consider a date, maybe January 2nd. On January 2nd, you measured late deliveries and you got 15%. Great. Today is March 2nd. So in March 2nd, you measure the late deliveries of January 2nd and you get the same result. So you get 15%. If your measurement system has replicability. Two key elements in your measurement system, replicability and reproducibility. When you start digging into the data, you need to measure the baseline, right? In our example, we have that our baseline is 20% late deliveries. Then later in the process, we are going to measure, but we are confident in this measurement system. Now it's time to move on and go to the analyze phase. Analyze. In this phase of the DMAIC approach, you will deep dive into data, initially thinking about all the possible factors that could have an impact on the problem you are solving. In other words, on late deliveries. The weather that has an impact on shipping could be a factor. Another factor could be the limited capacity at your manufacturing plant. Another factor could be that production is aware of customer orders late, and the list can continue. Spend your time understanding what data tell you. In looking at potential relationships among these factors. There are different tools that help you to do this, but regardless the toolkit that you are applying, you need to know what data you need to use and the right sources. From the many factors that you started, at the end of the phase, you will be able to identify the top 3, 4, or 5 that have the highest impact on your problem, on your late deliveries. This is why it's called the funneling effect, because you start with many at the top, and then you will be reducing the number of factors, reducing complexity, keeping only the factors that have the highest impact on the problem you are solving, on your late deliveries. Ready to move on to the next phase? Improve. Improve. This is the fun phase of the DMAIC approach. This is the time for you to shine. You need to think about what solutions and implement those solutions, but only on those factors that have the highest impact on the problem you are solving, on your late deliveries. At the end of the phase, you will measure, and you will measure the result by using a measurement system that you previously determined that has reproducibility and replicability. If you get to 10% late deliveries or lower, great. If not, you will continue working on the improvements. The next phase in the DMAIC approach is the control phase. After all of this work, you want this result to be sustained over time. So 6 months later, are you having 10% or lower late deliveries? If so, that would be fantastic. But you need to ensure that that will happen. And that is why the control phase is so important. It's fundamental for the continuous improvement. not every time you need to start from scratch. You repeat and refine. Technology can help you to solve many of your issues, but the essential piece is to have solid foundations, optimized processes. You will hear from amazing guests about how different technology applications can help you, in particular when you are scaling your business. And now to circle back on how data applied to supply chain can give you an edge to achieve greater profit through cost reduction and revenue increase, I'm going to give you key metrics so you can focus and measure your efforts. One of the metrics is perfect order. Yes, it needs to be perfect. But this metric will help you to identify areas for improvement and is a good indication on how your supply chain is performing. Another metric, cash to cash cycle. So that has different components, an inventory component, days in payable component, and days in receivables component. This metric is closely linked to profitability. So it's important that you keep a close eye on it. Another metric is cycle time, supply chain cycle time, or the lead time. This metric considers how fast you can deliver without having inventory in place. So it goes from the moment that you place a PO until you deliver. If you are sourcing from China, a good estimate would be, for example, 90 days. 1 month for production and about 2 months for shipping. Another metric that is related to cycle time is the fill rate, or customer satisfaction, or service level. Is the demand that you are able to meet without having back orders or lost sales. This is critical because if you are not meeting your demand, that means that you are losing sales. And your sales are not the same that your demand. So it's very important to keep track of this metric. Another one is about inventory turnover. Inventory turnover measures how many times you sold inventory in a specific period of time. It's important to keep track of this metric because you know that inventory implies cost. So we need to try to keep that inventory flowing. It will depend on the industry, but of course, there are efforts that we can make. I hope you will find this helpful for your supply chain and for your profits. Stay tuned for great episodes of the new video series, with amazing guests that will be talking about data, supply chain, and technology. Also, coming up really soon in March, we will have the data-powered supply chain bootcamp. You don't want to miss that. So stay tuned and see you next week.